All right, we're here with Firebrand pastors today, and somebody told me that it malfunctioned and started playing keeping tabs for some reason. My other
Oh,
live
no.
stream. I'm not sure why it did that, but that's interesting. But anyway, all that to say, this is the place where Firebrand pastors have conversations, and my counterpart is not here today. Pastor Ben Good is away. He actually had a previous obligation today, so I'm just kind of going solo here. But I have a good friend, so I don't have to be totally solo here. I have a good friend, TJ Morris here. He is
Hello?
I'm going to get this wrong. Program director, correct? Right?
Yeah,
Did I
that's
get that
correct.
right?
Program
Okay.
director. Yeah.
Program director of I normally just say director, and I want to try to get that right. So program
Okay.
director for Bible Camp, and it's an institution that's very special to me because back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and giant meteors were falling from the sky, and you know it was much darker time. I actually attended Forward Bible Camp in the 1980s, so which I guess really wasn't that long ago, but it seems like it was quite a while ago now. But it was very formative for me, and so this is really exciting, TJ, to be able to have you on here because you
Yeah.
are the next wave of those who are just doing a tremendous job. Essentially, I mean, in my mind, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but just to whet everybody's appetite, you're essentially training leaders for the next generation, and
Yeah.
that's just very exciting. And I guess
Yeah.
the only reason I mentioned that is because I am one of those was that was so impacted
Hmm.
by Forward Bible Camp
Yeah.
that I ended up going into the ministry because I loved it so much, and here we are. I don't know what 26 years later, and God is good. He's kept
Yes. Yeah.
Marilyn and me going, and a lot of that foundation was laid there at camp for a Bible camp. So really appreciate this ministry. I just wish you were here when Ben was here, but
Mm.
unfortunately he couldn't be. So he said he would catch the last part of it. I guess his appointment ends, and he'll
Okay.
be able to catch a little bit of this. But all
Cool.
of that to say, really appreciate you taking some time out,
Yeah.
TJ. I know you're busy.
I'm
You
glad I
said you
could be
had
here
something
too
going on
when
there.
he's, yeah, I'm glad I could be here too when he's not here. Like, so that way, yeah, help you out today.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
good.
And
Yeah.
that's true. Well, he was asking me, "Who are you gonna have on? Who are you gonna have on?" Because we don't always have guests. Sometimes it's
Okay.
literally just a conversation between, firebrand pastors, which, the idea of firebrand is being plucked from the fires of hell and,
Yeah.
being saved to the uttermost and
It's cool.
being placed firmly in the arms of God through Jesus Christ. That's the whole idea there. But Ben and I just have that very special bond as far as that's concerned, and so that's the reason why we did this, just to have conversations, just to be able to open things up and talk to people, even talk to each other, and broach some subjects that pastors are concerned about. But the idea today
That's
that
cool.
I'd like to focus on, since you're here, and
Hmm.
this is not by mistake, obviously. This is
Yeah.
planned. But I want to talk about local missions and the impact that they have on the local church, because there's a lot
Mm.
of local going on, not loco,
Yeah.
a lot of local
Yeah.
going on there. So it is important that those two concepts are connected, and that the local church is supporting local missions, not just world missions. Certainly, that is true
Yep.
too. But
Hmm.
sometimes I think local missions are not quite as apparent to local church ministries. And so I'd like to focus on that today. And so let me just start out with this. How long have
Okay.
you been program director, and have you
Yeah.
ministered overall at Forward Bible Camp?
Yeah. So I've been at camp since 2006 with my wife. We met at Bible college. Then we ended up here. and did an internship under Mitch McAfee, who's still our executive director. And then 2 years of internship, and we've been here ever since. So it's about 18 years that we've been here now. So
Wow.
we at times feel like we're just learning things, and at other times feel like, man, we've been around a while. It's been a lifetime that we've been up here. So yeah, it's been a good long while.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, how did you come to choose camping
Mm,
missions?
yeah.
Like that type of
Mm,
local church
yeah.
missions. How did you come about by that?
I, like you, had an impact. I was impacted at camp. So my
Hmm.
dad was our youth leader growing up. There was a couple different lay youth leaders that were at our home church there, and the place I grew up. My dad was a youth pastor, well, youth leader. He wasn't technically a pastor but he really was, right? He was a
Yeah.
pastor
Yeah.
for
Oh, yeah.
18 years. So
Yes.
yeah, so he just didn't take that title, I guess, but him and another guy were there for 18 years together, and every year they would go to New Mexico, and at a camp there called Broken Arrow Bible Ranch, they would serve, and they would go for a week with a bunch of teens, and that ranged from 10 kids to, I think at one point they had like 22 kids that went on this mission trip down
Wow.
to New Mexico. And every year I wanted to go. I didn't always get to go as a kid, but then when I was a teenager, we went a couple different times. And when I was 17, I went to that same camp for a whole summer. And somehow my parents let me drive down there. I went down, drove in my dad's truck somewhere around like Kingston. The transmission blew up
Oh
and ended up
no.
staying overnight while the local Ford dealership fixed the truck there. And that summer was just hugely impactful. I went to that camp that summer expecting that I was going to be a cop. I was signed up for criminal justice classes, and they're at Sac City in Sacramento.
Wow.
And so that next semester I went to classes, and it seemed like every single week I just felt God telling me that I wouldn't be content unless I was doing what he wanted me to do at camp. And so then I went to Shasta Bible College, where I met my wife, and that's where he started to direct me towards the camp that he called us to here at Forward Bible Camp. So it was just a call to camp missions, and then he kind of moved that through meeting Carissa, and I found out that Forward Bible Camp is a lot like the camp that I grew up going to, Broken Arrow Bible Ranch, where their camp is all mission ran, all volunteers and missionaries. And our camp here at Forward is the same, where it's all missionaries and volunteers. There's no paid staff. And part of that's just to keep those costs as low as possible so we can get kids that don't know Jesus into camp. And each camp has their own, I've gotten to know a lot more camps. And so I see how God uses camps that are, I've seen Christian camps as much as like $1,500 a week. And I know that God's, using camps all over the place, but where he has us right here is as missionaries that are reaching the unreached. And so we have kids that come to camp that wouldn't hear the gospel otherwise, that aren't stepping foot in churches because, they have different backgrounds or different things that they have issues with churches, but they're willing to come to a Bible camp because a friend invited them, and they end up here and they hear the good news. And we love it. I'm glad God called us the way he did. It's really neat. I've since been back to Broken Arrow with my family. That was really fun. And we've been back a couple times to go visit them. And it's been an interesting journey to see how God led us here. But those last 18 years we've been here and serving the unreached of our community and the communities around us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in youth ministry of any kind, whether it's based directly in the local church or it's outside the local church, is so huge
Hmm.
because I know when I first came to Grizzly Flats Community Church, there was no youth group, and that was interesting because
Yeah.
every church I had been in up until that time had some kind of youth ministry, but there were no youth in the church because
Wow.
Grizzly Flats, there are a lot of older people up here. It's not a retirement community, but there are a lot of retirees up here. But the community had grown to the point where there were, I'm just guessing, but probably 100 kids in Grizzly Flats at that point in time, enough to have a school.
Yeah.
And so they started a school up. And
Wow.
it was interesting starting a youth ministry with no kids.
Yeah,
Because that's kind of
totally.
the point of youth ministry, to have kids.
Yeah.
And so it became an outreach for us. And, lo and behold, two of those young men who came up through the ranks ended up becoming deacons in our church, years later.
Yeah.
And they've
And serving with us at Forward Bible Camp.
Jesse and Jacob Withrow. They've helped
Yeah.
for many years up there.
Yeah.
But I guess the only reason I say that is because there's no accounting for that, because I don't want to say that the attitude it wasn't important. I think the attitude it's important, but we have no kids. So what do we do? And so it took us to actually go out into the community and actually make youth ministry and outreach and be flexible. With you, there's more of a structure, obviously, because this is a camp. But have you seen any of that same kind of flexibility? I would even say, even from year to year, with the number of kids that come, with the kinds of kids that come. I mean, you must have to have some kind of flexibility there in your ministry as well.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think that all camp people have to have the spiritual gift of flexibility, because you never know what's going to happen. There's just too many. Yeah. There's too many variables. I know occasionally we'll get like a summer missionary that's little uptight, I guess, and not very flexible, and they have to learn really fast to be very flexible.
Yes.
So, yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. Want to make sure I kind of answer so that I guess the key there is the flexibility of
yeah.
So
I mean, how flexible do you have to be when you're doing all of this? Because obviously you're working with young people, you're working with volunteers.
Right. Yeah, totally. We're working, it's all volunteers. And so, we get some people for a couple days. And so we have very, little training compared to some camps, as far as, we'd love to have more training with our volunteers, right? But you get, a dad that volunteers his time for a week, and getting him to come in for, 6 hours of training is really hard, let alone some camps have as much as 80 hours. So 2 weeks, solid weeks of training, where they'll do 80 plus hours of training during that time. And so we're like, that'd be nice. But yeah, you have to be very flexible.
A degree for that.
Yeah. Right. And then, those camps that are doing that, they're paying their staff, and they're paying them to come in for an extra 2 weeks of training. So we have to have flexibility on that and work with that. Over the last couple of years, legislation type stuff has gotten a lot worse, where it's just it feels like we're constantly dealing with, water testing and insurance and regulation and things that weren't as much a thing before. And so with that, there's, some flexibility behind the scenes as well. But I think what's interesting to me, and Mitch kind of called this beforehand, when we were trying to figure out what we're going to do with all the newest regulation on adults in cabins and stuff. And we've always used teens in cabins. So we were praying and trying to figure out what we're going to do. And, Mitch called it and said that, Satan meant this for evil, but God's going to move this. And we did. We got better staff because of it. We got more staff because of it. So this last year, I personally, in the 18 years I've been here, it was the best year we had for volunteers. And so in the midst of more difficulty, in regulation and background checks, and we've always done background checks, but now fingerprinting and mandated reporter training and things that are added on. Now we're like, man, those are actually really good. And we're seeing that hey, it kind of thins the herd a little bit. You get the ones that maybe don't necessarily want to be here that bad, or that are here for the wrong intention, or things like that. And so we're actually, that we do have to be flexible with it, but it's also, we're seeing that God's really working in those things that initially we saw as difficulties. So yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. And I'm sure, especially with the legal aspect of it, you really have to be flexible, because a lot's changed. So much has changed over the years. I mean, to put it in perspective, in the 1980s, so what is that, 2 or 3 camp directors ago, I would guess now, maybe 2. Let's see, was it
So
Ed
that's an
Kennedy
interesting
before
side
you?
point.
Yeah,
So Mitch has been here since 2001, and then
okay.
Ed Kennedy was here for I believe it was 9 years before that,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
then Harvey Coles was here for 30
Yes.
years before that.
Yeah.
So,
Harvey. Okay.
and then before that was someone who I don't have that written down, so I don't remember his name
I
offhand.
don't
But
know. My memory
yeah,
goes as far back as Harvey and Pat Coles, and
okay, yeah,
we called him Uncle Harvey,
yep. Everyone called
and
him Uncle
Pat was
Harvey,
Aunt
which I
Pat.
never met him, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
he
everyone
was.
says.
They were interesting guys. They were
Mm,
interesting people. But I mean, just to put it in perspective, when the Coles had it, they had these rickety old shack cabins. And, in those days, El Dorado County was this much smaller county. I mean, not geographically, but just the look and feel.
mm.
Pardon me for putting it this way. I grew up in El Dorado County, so I guess I can say this, but it was a redneck county. I mean, just totally redneck. I mean, Placerville was like the hub of redneckedness in this area. And no offense to anybody who's watching in Placerville, but that's how it was. And it was
Yeah,
really interesting because, they knew the people in the government. And so they were like, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. And so some of these cabins, they had rocks underneath them, literally you go down the river and pull river rocks out and put them
wow.
under. And then when Ed Kennedy, I remember when Ed Kennedy took over, they had some county inspections that came through. And they went, River Rock, no. And so they had to tear down all of those cabins
Wow.
and rebuild some of those cabins. But I mean, these were literally built on concrete blocks and rock. And how things have changed, because we've
Yeah,
gone from, the cabins that have been built on natural out of
yeah,
natural stuff,
yeah,
and
yeah,
wouldn't pass inspection at all today, to now you have to have, a couple
yeah,
different background checks, and
yeah.
you know um,
Right, right.
you have to have two. I believe it's 2 counselors per cabin, and it's so much more
Yeah,
restrictive now because of
yeah,
the day and age we live in. So
yeah,
yeah, I can
yeah. I
imagine
remember
that'd be
I had
difficult.
a local guy telling me about his mom was here in the first like 2 years of camp.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah,
she
my
was
dad
19,
was too. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, camp
Yeah.
started in 1934. So she's here in like 1935.
Oh,
And
okay.
so
Okay. My
he was
dad
telling
was
me that,
after that. Yeah.
oh, okay. And he said that his mom lived in Wilton, and the missionaries from camp would show up with a Model A flatbed
Mm.
with hay bales on the back, and they'd
Yep.
pick kids up from the country there, and they'd drive up to Auburn, and then they'd go down the canyon, dirt road, all dirt back then,
Yep.
and down the Auburn the Auburn Canyon, and then to get to the bottom, and the truck the gear ratio wasn't right to go back up to Cool,
Oh
so they had
no.
to turn the truck around and back all the way up to Cool with kids on the back.
That's
And then they get
crazy.
to Cool and they turn around and they drive up to camp.
That's
I'm like, oh
nuts.
man, I was born in
Yeah.
the wrong generation.
Yeah, I know. I
Sounds fun.
wonder. I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of Model A's that were tootling around, but the camp, I don't know if when you guys came, if the camp still had it, but the camp had a Model A on the property.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, it's really
Wow.
strange that you mentioned Model A, because it had a Model A, but it was stripped down, and all it was like this. It was just like the frame and the bottom part
Wow.
of it with, I don't know, like a roll cage or something that they'd put on there for safety or
Wow.
something. And yeah, and it was still going when the Coles
That's cool.
had the camp. I think Ed may have done something with it. I don't know.
Yeah,
But, yeah, there was
that's
wouldn't it
cool.
be funny if that very Model A was the one that they ended up
Right?
donating to camp?
Could have been
And
too.
ended up
Yeah,
with
that's wild.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. But like I said, I mean, things have changed so much that
Yeah.
shows you, I mean, that's less than 100 years. I know that sounds like a long time, but
It's
there's still
90
people.
next year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's still people alive from that time period.
Yeah.
Who might actually remember Cam Forward, and here we are,
Yeah.
nitpicking about we. I am not trying to sound negative, but I know it must be
Yeah. Yeah.
frustrating to try to deal with all of the red tape because I'll tell you
Yeah.
what, even churches are dealing with this right now.
Hmm.
With
Yeah.
youth groups, we have the same stipulations, and we haven't even restarted our youth ministry because of everything that's been going on with our buildings burning down, and then of
Mm.
course just not enough people to be able to justify a ministry like that. And a lot of the kids are gone because most of Grizzly Flats burned down. So it's
Yeah.
it's just it makes it very difficult. But our hearts definitely go out to you as far
Yeah.
as that's
Yeah.
concerned.
Yeah. And
Mm,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that's a, I guess, difficulty or struggle at times, but yeah, I'm not complaining. Like I said, I
yeah,
do think God's using it for better.
yeah,
It's just sometimes when you're driving down to retest because something went wrong or whatever,
right.
you're like, man, this is the best tasting water I've ever had. And we have to spend way too much time testing that same water.
I know, I know. I know our water company, I won't get into that, but just some of the
Yeah.
things they've had to go through. And it's like you realize that that is like coming almost directly out of a, riverhead that's, just a few miles up the mountain, and
Right.
it comes into this holding pond, and
Yeah.
it's fresher than the junk they drink down in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's yeah, we're blessed to be where we are. Well, let me ask you this.
Okay.
So, what is the motivating fact? If there were somebody listening today who maybe is interested in camping ministry, but they're
Okay.
not sure, they're not sold on that, what would be the motivating factor in getting into local missions? Maybe you could even broaden it. I mean, if you wanted to
Mm.
broaden it to missions in general, that's fine, but
Yeah. Yeah.
just to focus on local missions, what's the motivating factor for getting involved?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say if you're a Christian and want to serve, like, you need to be serving and finding
Yeah,
those places
agreed.
that you can serve. And so, um, on a regular basis, we all need to be serving in our local church. We all need to be finding places that we can serve. And then as you find some spare time and are able to serve in other areas, other places, I do think serving anywhere is impactful for us more than the people that we serve. And I see that with our cabin leaders where they come up to camp and um, they serve others, and at times some people feel like I'm getting a benefit out of this, like it's for me, and I'm inviting them because it's good for them and it's good for the campers that are coming. And recently after youth group, I had a young man come up to me who served with us for years, and he was a summer missionary 2 years ago, and he said, I just want to thank you for what you guys are doing at Forward
Yeah.
Bible Camp. He said,
Yes.
I look at my Christian walk as before Forward Bible Camp and after Forward Bible Camp, and I just want you to know that what you guys are doing isn't just impacting the campers, but it's impacting the leaders as well. And when he said that, first I'm tearing up as he's talking. Like, it was a very emotional.
Yeah.
It was awesome to hear this 18-year-old put to words how impactful serving has been at camp. But it's not just this location. Like, there's nothing special about, like, we're at 4,000 feet in Quintet.
Yeah.
It's all about what God does through the people that serve here. So, like recently I had someone else say, yeah, I've got a friend that needs to get away and find a place that they can just get away and meet God. And camp's the first thing that came to mind. And while I love that camp's the first thing that came to their mind, because that means they were impacted here, it's here it's not the location. It's nothing special specifically here. It's the fact that when we're serving others, we're thinking more about what God wants to do. We're thinking about his kingdom come, his will be done, right?
Yeah.
Instead of like
Absolutely.
our will and whatever else, the day-to-day grind. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think Yeah, serving is definitely impactful. And, if you haven't served outside your local church, well, first, if you're out there listening and you don't serve in your local church, connect with your church and definitely serve there. But yeah, if you're looking for a place to serve, Forward Bible Camp is definitely a great place to see God work and move in the lives of those that are there. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Along those lines, so how important is the local? Let's just narrow it down,
Mm,
since we know what we're talking about here, camp. So
yeah.
the local camping ministry, how important is it for your ministry to plug people back into the local church? What does that look like? Because I know I've talked to you before, obviously, so
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not starting
Right.
a
Right.
fresh
You're,
page here, but there may be some people listening
yeah.
who are. So what does that look like?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, so one of my primary goals is that we're raising up leaders, not just for here at camp, because, I get that people only have so much time in their life that they can serve at camp. We do have a few people that come every summer. Like they're adults, they come for like 3, 4, 5 weeks of summer and join us. But for the most part, I get that most people end up at a point where they have families and they're serving tends to only be able to be in that local church because of the amount of time it takes.
Mhm.
You can only take off work so many weeks, for instance. I get that. But one of our goals is that we would train up leaders that would be able to go back to their home church, that would be able to go back to their home communities and serve and lead and teach in ways that they weren't able to before. So as we think about our different leaders, whether they're fresh, it's first year they're here, or it's leaders that are coming back and serving a second or third summer, we're looking for ways to grow them, to stretch them, and to give them new opportunities to lead and serve, and to to teach them to do those things. So some of the things that we're doing on a weekly basis, we have leaders that are, for one, just working with campers in general. That's definitely a need. That's one of our biggest needs, is cabin leaders. But then we're giving people that come back opportunities to teach. We have small groups with our what we call crew, and crew's a service opportunity for really anyone. It's more like a camp. It's a service camp, and so you don't even have to be a Christian to be a crew member. To be a crew leader, we do want Christians that want to serve the Lord and teach. And then the crew leaders they get opportunities to actually lead Bible studies and to teach young people to lead Bible studies, which is a great skill for them to have when they go back to their home churches, to be able to, not just to be able to be a part of something or to lead, but to teach others to do that, to teach Bible studies as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And along those lines, because obviously, once again, you and I have had conversations before, and your heart is obviously to see young people saved. That's certainly your primary goal, and I've seen that, myself, because you that I think probably for a pastor, it's a similar view, where we have that view, such a strong view of eternity, maybe
Mm,
slightly more than the average person, that we just desire to see souls come to a saving
yeah.
knowledge of Jesus Christ. But even beyond that, I mean, obviously, heaven exults, they
Yeah.
rejoice when one soul comes to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. But even beyond that, I mean, obviously, missions, local missions like the camping mission outreach is, very much that evangelistic type ministry. But you are training leaders, intensely, training leaders in a way that the local church can't do. We can do our best to teach within the context of the local church, but at least the way that I remember Camp Forward, and from what I've heard from Jesse and Jacob, and even being involved a little bit up there in that ministry myself. Um, I've it's more like a crucible. It's like where you're just
Mm,
really intense. You're put under fire, and it's
mm,
just really, really an intense experience in leadership. And you learn a lot of lessons when you're under a lot of pressure like that. So
yeah.
just give us, say, the average week at
Mm,
Camp Forward, for, maybe if you can give it to us from the perspective of somebody who's coming up to help, and they want to be a part of that ministry that's more than, say, just kitchen duty, maybe a camp counselor, somebody like that. I mean,
yeah.
what does that look like during an
Yeah.
average week of Camp Forward during the heyday of
Right.
Camp Forward?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, to be fair to the local churches, because I'm very involved at my local church too, right?
Mhm.
It's so different because
Yes.
we at church we have, like for a youth group, we might have like, you know, 30, 45 minutes of Bible teaching, and it's, and say like last night I was teaching and there's, I think 30 minutes of teaching. And then they had 20 minutes of small group, so like round that up to, you got 1 hour a week. Right.
Right.
And at camp, part of
Not
what makes it
intense.
so different, right. Right. It can only be intense as, yeah, man, actually. So last night, it was pretty awesome. My middle school guys that I had in small group, they were so on fire for just the
Good.
conversation, just
Good.
listening and talking and waiting for others to share. It was awesome. Anyway,
Good.
so
Excellent.
but to be fair to other ministries that we've been involved in, even there's just so much time, right? You have throughout the course of a week of camp, we're doing usually 30 minutes or so a day of like Bible memory, 30 minutes or so a day of missionary story, like 2 hours a day of chapel, which includes like an hour of teaching and like an hour of worship. And then we've got, small group time where they do their cabin talk. And so their like whole day is filled with these conversations about God and what he's doing in our lives. And so
Yeah.
it's spread throughout so that a kid that doesn't yet have a relationship with Jesus still has a great time, but at the same time they've never had more Jesus than they do when they're here at camp. And so that's one thing that makes it so neat and so special, and why you see kids grow so much in a week or two at camp, because yeah, they haven't had that much Bible in
Yeah.
the last year at their church or at whatever, wherever else they're going. So I think that's one big thing. I think another thing is along the lines of serving, for those that are leaders, it's exhausting, long hours, you're tired. And so there's a point when you can't help but rely on God. You have to lean on Jesus, because you can't do it on your own at some point. And I think we rarely get to that point outside of a ministry where we're going and serving, whether it be a short-term mission trip or a camp or something like that. And so I think, if you're even a single conversation with someone outside of something like that, just someone you meet or whatever on the street, is, it's just one conversation. Often we feel like we could do that on our own. And we have to get to the point where we realize that we need Jesus for every breath we take, for everything we do. And so even those single conversations, we can't do those without him. Yes. But there's a point that camp kind of forces that in, where it's not quite the same level, because you can't do it on your own.
Yeah.
So I've seen many leaders like kind of break at different points, like, and I laugh, not because like, okay, yeah, but I've seen it where they're crying and they're exhausted and they just want a nap, and we do what we can to help them get rest. But at the same time, like, that's when God's working. That's when God's like pointing them to him, and they're realizing that they can't do without him. So yeah.
Yeah, very important ministry. And if I could just share another personal moment of my own,
Mm,
and I don't want to share too many of
yeah.
those, because I
No,
want
I'd
to,
love to hear it.
yeah, I want to try to make sure that you are that we are able to cover all the bases as far as the camping ministry is concerned. But the camping ministry goes outside of obviously young people. You guys have a lot of church groups that are up there as well, that benefit from the campground. And by the way, I didn't mention this, and I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning. Camp Forward, or Forward Bible Camp. I grew up calling it Camp Forward because I'm lazy. So
it switched actually after that. So because
yeah,
it was when Mitch came on that he was like, we need to go back to Forward Bible Camp. Is like, that's what we need to anyway. Because everyone that was here before a certain time calls it Camp Forward.
yeah,
and everyone who that's
for me, it's not generational. It's just lazy. It's easier to say Camp Forward. But anyway, all that to say, you guys, you have other churches that go up and they utilize the campgrounds and beautiful grounds, by the way. Just what you guys have done, and some of the previous directors that were up there. You guys have just done a phenomenal job to put things together and make it keep that rustic feel, obviously that camping feel, but still have some of the amenities that are necessary, obviously, for some kind of, I guess you could say, creature comforts up there. With all that saying, you guys even go the extra mile, because when Grizzly Flats was burned down, and my family and I were running around the earth, like Cain, wandering through the earth, wondering what in the world is the next step in our lives, because our house burned down, our church burned down, all of that. Those are all well-established facts. But in that moment, we ended up at my brother's house, and then ended up at my parents' house in Idaho. And so I'm doing all the church work from Idaho for like a week and going, yeah, this is not going to work. And so we came back, and it was like, where in the world are we going to go? And you and Carissa reached out to us and said, hey, you've got a place here. And we ended up living in the chapel of the Camp Forward. And we ended up just, being blessed by that. We ended up getting COVID at Camp Forward. That was miserable.
Yes, it was.
It was interesting. But we had internet. It didn't have cell service. I will say, I had to go down the road to get cell service. But we had things that if we would have been in a shelter, there were some people who were in shelters for weeks after that fire. And we had a nice comfy spot. A chapel doesn't sound like a real comfortable place, but you guys made it up for us.
Yeah, it's not that comfortable for
really. Oh, but no, it was, compared to some of those people, they were in with like 40, 50 people in some of these group holding areas. And I was surprised to find some of those people were there for weeks because they didn't have family. And I almost felt selfish because I had as soon as we moved up here 13 years ago, we found a safe house. I called up my brother and said, hey, do you mind if you guys, in the event of a fire, God forbid, that should burn through and we have to evacuate, do you mind if we come down to your house? And 13 years ago, he said, oh, yeah, sure. Why not? And so we ended up down there, and we ended up staying with my parents for about a week. And, we've got all these places that we could land. And we ended up landing up at Camp Forward. But we weren't the only family that was impacted by that. There were several people impacted by what you did. You reached out to others, the Withrows, who, by the way, Jesse is with us. And just so you know, there it is. I don't know if you can see that comment up there, but he says best.
Yeah.
The Withrows, you gave them a place to stay. Some other people from Grizzly Flats from our church, you gave them a place to stay. It was phenomenal. And so, the camping ministry goes beyond just, impacting young people, which is the most important. But for us, it impacted us personally. And for that, we appreciate it. And we thank you for your ministry where you reach out even beyond the bounds of your normal ministry and provide that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's right. It's all because our God is bigger than the property, right? Our God is bigger than the people that are serving here, and you know, there's been people at different times that are coming up here consistently and helping all the time, and I remember hearing one say, I don't know what you guys are going to do when I stop coming around because I'm serving all the time, and our God is bigger than that guy. Our God is bigger than me. Because we're not here to elevate ourselves or the people that are serving here. We're here to elevate his name and glorify him. So,
Yeah,
praise God that we had the place for you guys. Praise
yeah.
God that that worked out. And, it is a bummer that the chapel doesn't have a bathroom when you're living there, I'm sure, but
Yeah, it was Delta. It was the Delta strain, which had the stomach stuff with it. So that was
yeah, I
interesting. But
remember
I
that.
will tell you
Yeah.
what, I was in shape after that week of absolute misery. It was 6 days for me. My wife, it was a lot longer. But anyway,
Yeah.
I just wanted to insert that, because I did appreciate it. My wife apparently did too. She said it was such a
Yeah.
blessing to be at camp after Caldor. It was good to be at a place the children were comfortable and safe. So
Yeah.
and they had friends too. So
Right.
which was kind of cool
And
because you got lots of
camp's
kids.
like home anyway. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, my wife
Yep.
also noticed you're wearing the fall retreat shirt. So
Oh, I am. Yeah. Yep. Thanks for noticing, Marilyn. Yeah.
yeah, she notices things like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, all
Yeah.
that to say, okay, so let's just kind of tie this up
Can
a
you see
little
the
bit.
back there? Is that
Oh
possible?
yeah.
Can you see that?
Yep, there we go.
Yeah.
Fall retreat 2024. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're color coordinated too. I like that. You're color coordinated with your lighting in the back. So that's perfect. Yeah. Yeah, I was joking with Jesse yesterday. He does our keeping tabs spot at 4 on Wednesdays, and I'm kind of a co-host, and I had a lighting malfunction, and I had one color for one. You can kind of see it a little bit, but that one was blue. So you had green and blue, and it actually looked kind of cool, but it didn't correspond perfectly like I like it to. But yours goes really nicely, so I like that. But
Yeah.
just to kind of draw it all together here, if you were to pass on anything to the next generation, I mean, this can be anything. It can be camping ministry. It can be their personal walk with Christ, which is for the believer everything, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you could pass on anything for the next generation of church leaders and missionaries, because there may be some of those who are listening here today,
Mm-hmm.
what would that be?
I would say I recently was preaching on John the Baptist, and as I was looking at the passage on him, he says, he's telling them repent, right? The kingdom is here, and
Yes.
he's letting them know that that's the priority. And I think one thing that struck out so like obvious to me in studying that and looking there was that John the Baptist could get the entire world to see that God is good, or that God is love, or that, like some particular attribute. Then the world around us, they love the idea that God is love, right? That's great. God is love. God is love. And everyone seems okay with that. But God is also just. And so I think for me, the thing that I would pass on is the value and just the urgency of sharing that we need forgiveness, that salvation is key, that people need to know that first. That's the top priority. So we have at camp, my priority is that everyone that comes on the property hears the good news of Jesus. They need to know that we're sinners, and that sin separates us from God. And so the priority, right, of salvation, and just recognizing that while there's lots of good things that we can learn from God's word, that none of it means anything. Like the entire world could know that God is love and go to hell. And so we really want them to recognize that their sin separates them, and that loving God, that God that does love them, allowed Jesus to come, and that Jesus came, died, rose again for their sin. And that's the urgency. That's our top priority. That's what we want at camp. And that's what I would tell you, those that are listening online, is that we need to share that good news, and that it is good news, that it's available to all. Another thing, so I watch one of the videos, the groups that I love watching is oh, come on. It's like the wrong word there. It's Abolitionists Rising. I was thinking Apologists Rising, and that's
right.
not right. So Abolitionists Rising is a group that does, they do like kind of street evangelism, but their main priority is to share that that we need to abolish abortion. As it's a sin. It's like slavery. It needs to be abolished. And so they're abolitionists for that. And anyway, I really like some of their videos and stuff. But one thing that I love is that they're so quick to share the good news of Jesus, and that it's not just about abolishing abortion, that it's also, and it's not just God is love, but it's, hey, there's forgiveness for the sin of abortion, is what they say. And, there's forgiveness for all of our sins. And I think that's what I would push for anyone that's listening, is that's the priority. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's somebody in the area, and we actually, we have quite a few people in a vast geographical area, if you can believe that watch this, because Ben, my co-host, is from New York. And so, obviously we have some people in New York who are probably watching right now. But if there are people here in Northern California and they want to get involved with Forward Bible Camp and the ministry, how would they go about doing that?
So first off, those in New York, hello. I have never been in New York, but I would love for New Yorkers to come to Forward Bible Camp. So
absolutely.
That camp I went to in New Mexico, I went all the way to New Mexico to serve for a summer, or for the different weeks of mission trips. And I say that now, not because like you were wrong, Bill, but like I get that it's unlikely that the New Yorkers are going to come out here.
No, that's a good point.
I do think there's something special to going far away and serving. Side point, I just heard a pastor that I really like was kind of bashing the idea of short-term missions. And I get that we need to evaluate the value of short-term missions, and the cost of short-term missions to what it brings. But I know, for instance, when I was 17 and went to New Mexico to serve, there's something to going to New Mexico and serving that's different than if I'd gone to, I want to say there's 90 Christian camps in California. There's 90 that are part of the Christian Camp and Conference Association. There's probably more than that in California. So anyway, so there's a lot of Christian camps, but there's something different about going to New Mexico. So anyway, New Yorkers, I'd love to have you as well. But as far as the way that people could serve with us, there's a lot of different ways.
I love that point. Yeah. That's terrific. Yeah. I stand corrected.
And I wasn't trying to correct Bill, but I mean, I guess
that's great.
I guess it was a little bit.
It. Yeah, no, that's terrific.
So so as far as the ways that you guys could serve, we do have, we have cleanup days that are one day that you could come serve for a day. We have people that come up for an entire summer that are summer missionaries. Summer missionaries raise support. So they raise support to fund whatever they might have lost from being at camp for that summer. So we have them sign up through In Faith. That's the mission organization that we're with. And In Faith is a US-based mission organization. They're just in the continental US, and they've been serving people here for 200 plus years. It's 207 years or something. So we're part of In Faith. They were American Missionary Fellowship, and before that, the American Sunday School Union. Yeah. So you could be a summer missionary with us. You could serve for a whole summer, raise support, and cover maybe a job that would be lost by being here for a whole summer. And then there's everything in between. People come up for a week or two, depending on availability for work. We have some camps that are, so like our shortest camp for like guys, this last year was Sunday to Wednesday. So depending on what your days off are, you might be able to come and be a leader with us, or a cabin leader, work in the kitchen, or lifeguard with us, or be a nurse with us for one of the camps, depending on that availability, with only taking a couple days off work. So we have people who serve. We have people who give financially. There's people who give to camp monthly. There's people who give yearly. And then we have missionaries, myself, Mitch and Tammy McAfee. And we've got, we got some missionaries that are actually working towards being missionaries with us.
Cool.
I'm kind of hesitant because I don't know.
Yeah.
Last I heard, they wanted to tell their kids, but
right.
they had time to tell their kids. So anyway,
too late.
But
you missed your opportunity.
No, but we're very excited. Actually, no, I know they'd be great. But yeah, so we're very excited that Jake and Sherry Coder are actually looking to be. They want to come on full time with us and raise support to join us. So
I grew up with Jake. I grew up with Jake. So I know him very well.
So him and his wife have been serving with us since before I got here, and then they serve every year since then. And Jake's on our board, and so they love camp, but they're working towards full-time missions with us. So that's very exciting.
Cool.
So you could support one of our missionaries. If you're out there and you want information about my family, we have a website, Morris Missions, MORRIS missions.com. And from there, you can get our newsletters. You can get our a little more information about us. You could also join our support team. And we actually have a goal this year of getting 30 more donors, because at the beginning of this year, we're about halfway to full support. And so we were hoping to get to full support this year. And so we had about 30, and we're hoping to get 30 more this year. And God's provided 8 more already. So
cool.
We did lose a supporting church. So that was a bummer. So that's a little bit of a setback there, but God's providing, and it's been a really good year getting those extra 8 donors. So that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And if somebody wanted to go about giving, can they do that online? Do you have an online option or?
Yeah. So we have a website through In Faith. That's a little harder to find. So I would send you to morrismissions.com to find that link. It's on that website. And then that'll send you to In Faith, our mission, where you can give online. So we have a website there as well. It's just not so our website, we're able to, edit and have more details and video clips and things like that. So I do our video and photo editing at camp. So I like to keep some of that up on the website, and not just kind of a basic mission website, but something a little more in depth. So I enjoy that stuff.
Character. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, TJ. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And,
appreciate you having me on and talking to everyone here.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can have you on again sometime. You might want to co-host one of these times when either Ben or now that you got your feet wet, now that I got my camera set up, I couldn't figure that out for the longest time, and then there was an urgency with you inviting me on here. I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. How do you plug a camera? It gave you an excuse to do some tech stuff, and if there's anything about you that I was surprised by, and I guess I shouldn't be, because I think people are surprised when they find this out about me too, is how tech savvy you are and how much you're into cameras. Because I'll tell you what, you and I, we've had a few conversations about cameras, and some of our favorite YouTubers that do camera things and things like that. And that's kind of your guilty pleasure, is videography and taking pictures. You do a great job. I love you. I love the pictures that you get.
Thank you.
And the videos
I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I love doing the video stuff. I find that I wish I had more time for it. Like, that's one thing that's just like, I feel like often I'm like gathering supplies more than I am actually using them, but I do enjoy doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I would be live streaming if not for COVID. That was kind of a kick in the pants for me. And here we are, what is it, 4 years later? And God has used this kind of thing. It's not just, and I was joking about a guilty pleasure. Obviously, you use it for ministry, but that's kind of what we do here too is
Yeah.
use a lot of that expensive camera equipment that, oh, my parents got me a camera. Oh, this is cool. Wow. Hey, let's go take pictures. And now we're
Yep.
actually doing live streaming with it and all that. So yeah.
No, and I knew
It's
you were joking, but I do. It's funny because like it's one of those things where I'm sure my wife would be like, "Yeah, guilty pleasure. It's a guilty pleasure," but at the same time, like I do want to use it for His kingdom, but it
yeah.
is like, yeah.
Or at least that's our story and we're sticking to it, right?
I know people who don't know cameras. I'm sure like, wait, you want what? Like you have a
Yeah.
what? And like,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
and cameras are like, I mean, bottom line camera. The camera I'm using right now was actually donated to the church, and it's a live stream camera. And
Okay,
if you
cool.
look it up online, it's like $400 or $500, and all it is just basically a live stream camera.
Yeah.
You can't
Okay.
take pictures with it. It's called a Mevo, and it's this little tiny thing, and it's totally
Cool.
portable. And you can either use it as a webcam, which is what I'm using it for now, or you can use it with your cell phone and actually like do production style video, and
Cool.
it's really cool.
Yeah.
But that was actually donated to us. But I mean, I've got my camera, and I mean, I thought I was spending a bunch of money when on Black Friday, what, 7-8 years ago, I got this camera for like $700, and that was like,
Which is a chunk. Like, yeah, for sure.
it's a junk, but that's low level DSLR.
It is.
That's where
Yeah.
you start, is right there,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I mean, it's still going strong. I still have it, and I still take pictures. It takes great pictures, does better video than pictures. But I mean, you can soak, or you can invest. I shouldn't say soak, but you can invest. Make it sound negative here. You can invest, $6,000-7,000 in some of these cameras, and I don't have that kind of money, so I don't spend that kind of money. I spend a few $100s, and take
Right.
my birthday and my Christmas money that I get and save it up, and whatever else I can save up, and buy a little camera. But anyway,
Well, and
that's ministry.
that $6,000 to $7,000 can be body only. No lenses
Yeah.
included.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if you want cinema style video or something like that, and some of these cinema cameras are, like $20,000. It's like,
Yeah. Yep.
this is crazy. So it can be as expensive or as cheap as you want it to be. But
Right.
I'll tell you what, isn't it the cream that rises to the top when you can use it for ministry and use it
Yeah.
to God's glory?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Is there a time limit? What time do you guys usually only go for an hour?
Yeah, about an hour. So
Okay.
yeah, we're good. But let's go ahead and tie it up here. So really appreciate it, TJ. Thank you for being here today,
Thank you
and
for
for
having
everybody
me.
who watched, thank you for being here as well. And
Thanks,
so
guys.
we will see you next week.